Quite an introduction. We're going to get to when Keith graduated from high school. And Laura, you'll be interested in hearing how many teachers retired when he graduated. I want to read something directly from Keith Corley today at 20 minutes till 6. 2 days ago, Keith was going to send me a resume and some of his accomplishments over the years. And he did. At about 5:45 tonight. Jim, I'm sorry I have not gotten back to you. I was hired by Sheriff L.C. Biddick in February 1981. I was 20 years old. I worked the radio room in jail until I went to the police academy in 1982. I worked patrol until 1989 when I went into drugs. That's it. That's it. This is my buddy Keith. And then true to form, in about 20 minutes, he looked over what he had sent me, and he went on and said he worked in the drug unit. He did come out of that, as only Keith can do. If you'll bear with me, I've known Keith, I guess, all my life, and it's been a pleasure to know Keith. We've had some really fun times together. We've had some sad times together, but we've had fun times together. And I brought an annual from 1978 or 79, and it had a picture of Keith in there. Some of you might want to look at that before you leave. Keith and Jimmy Axon had the best afros in our senior class. If you look at Keith now, his hair's receding, going back there, he doesn't have much anymore, but at that time he had about a 6-inch afro. And he wore well, he looked good. Well, Keith was always coming up with little schemes, comical things to do at school, and one of them he decided that we would play together was when we came back from the lunchroom. We had a teacher named Miss Shirley Henderson, and most of y'all know Miss Shirley Henderson, some of you have her. She's probably one of the best teachers I ever had. She was great. She could educate the people. But Keith had this afro, and we decided that when we came back in the lunchroom with lockers going down each side of the hall, that I would grab him by the afro, and then he would grab my wrist so that I wouldn't hurt him or pull that precious hair out. And he would jump, and I'd pick him, and we'd shake and rattle and hit the lockers. And across from Ms. Henderson was, who was it, Keith?
Miss Zellner.
Miss?
Eugenia Zellner.
Miss Zellner. Miss Zellner was getting up in age and getting hard of hearing like I am now, but she could hear that because there was a big commotion, people coming up, seeing what was going on, why me and Keith were fighting. And I had no idea that it was just a joke. So she immediately proceeded to check on Keith and see how he was and send me straight to the office. Having a father that was on the school board wasn't always a good thing, because that was automatic three licks at school and then probably 10 when I got home. But I made it past it. A couple of days later, we were in Miss Henderson's room, and I was plotting on how I would get even with Keith. And little did I know Keith would get even with himself. We were in a very deep conversation about the word unmitigated gall in Miss Henderson's room. And out of the blue, Keith said, "Miss Henderson," said, "your parents remind me of my shoes." And she said, "Mr. Corley, what's that got to do with what's going on? But how do they remind you of that?" And Keith looked at her and said, "Two loafers." To the office, Corley. I think Keith got 5 licks for that. We had a lot of fun in Miss Henderson's room. Now, Keith had an Opel Cadet, as did my smart-aleck brother that introduced me. And he wrecked that, and then he got I think it was a Chevelle, nice Chevelle. Now, in the 70s, late 70s, you know, everything, we can remember these big speakers in the back seat. And Keith had just started dating Becky. Hadn't been dating long or whatever. And you'd see Keith, but at that time, people didn't live here then. You had where McDonald's is now. You had to come up to the square, and you had to go down to Jesse Daniels' Dairy Queen. And that's what the young folks did. They rode the L back and forth, see who was around, and all night long. Well, when Becky wasn't in the car with Keith, Laura, you need to hear this. He had these big old speakers and you could hear him coming a mile off, listening to the Commodores. Now, you knew Becky was in the car when Keith came easing down through there and put his blinker on to turn in at McDonald's. And he might wave a finger, but he didn't want to look, and he sure didn't want Becky looking over there at the rest of us over there. So he was a lot calm, cool, and collected when she was around. So I knew Keith knew how to act right. And he was on the right track, no doubt about that, with Becky. We attended several vacations together with the Ham family and the Corley family at Mexico Beach. And there's not much to do at Mexico Beach. It's a family beach. Mary Kate, I was hoping she was going to be here tonight. As long as I live, I will never forget her shrill voice, Keith. Keith and Becky decided they were going to walk down the beach for a little honeymoon time. And they left Mary Kate with Lydia. And she said that was the longest 30 minutes of her life. She didn't know a child could scream that long or that loud. Of course, as soon as they got back, Becky got Mary Kate. She immediately quit crying. And Keith said, well, what's the problem? He didn't have a clue as to what we had gone through for the last 30 minutes, and that's the way Keith is. He didn't have a problem. I got to tell a couple more stories, so bear with me. I guess it was about 1977. My father had a lot on Lake Oconee, and Phil, my brother, and I were in a truck with him, and we pulled through. There used to be a Diamond filling station across from where Burger King or some of that is now. And Keith Corley and his first cousin, Terry Mays, pulled up. He said, what y'all doing? Well, Daddy, thinking fast, he said, we're going fishing. I said, where are you going fishing? He said, we're going to Lake Oconee. And Terry, Keith, one said, you know, can we go? Well, me and Phil knew what we were going to do. We said, yeah, y'all come on. And that was back at the time, John Terry, when you could ride on the back of a truck. So in the summertime, they hopped on the back. Now, Keith had a lot of, you talk about going to the FBI Academy, you know, he's had a lot of training, you know, how to look at an investigative scene and look at your surroundings and all that. Now, George, we were all the way past Monticello when Keith tapped on the window and said, where are the fishing poles? We got to Edenton. Terry tapped on the window. He said, are we going to buy the poles when we get over there? About 20 minutes later, we got there, and there was, I think, 3 concrete trucks waiting on us. We had to pour a bunch of concrete that day, and had some wheelbarrows we had to roll. So Keith was a good sport about it. He helped out. I hope he always looked at his surroundings before he got into a vehicle, which is something I should have done one night. Keith was on the road, and I don't know if he's ever shared this with you, Sheriff, but I was uptown probably later than I should be, 12 or 1 o'clock at night, I guess. And Keith was on patrol, and he came through, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm not going home. I hate for you to hear this too, Benson. He said, well, get in the car. I got to go to High Falls and check on something. So I get in the car, and the first thing we have is a flat tire about a mile on the interstate. And I had to fix the flat tire. And then there is a call. So I think Chip Dunn was working, so Chip's going to take the call, and he goes on up to High Falls, and about the time we get between Johnsonville Road and High Falls, that call's over with. So I'm thinking, well, I got to ride in the sheriff's car, you know. We didn't get to see the blue lights or anything, but it was fun. So about that time, Chief Corley spots a car coming southbound with a tailpipe dragging, and sparks are going everywhere. All in the middle of summer, and it's dry. He said, we got to get him. I said, okay. I said, let me hit the lights. Hit the lights, and Keith cuts across the median. Here we are, chasing this car. I said, well, I don't think he's pulling over. And Keith's speeding up, and this car's speeding up. Well, then he hits the brakes, but he goes into the median. Then he goes across, and we go back northbound again. And I'm thinking if he slows down to 50, I'm jumping. Keith don't never slow down to 50. So then we get the median and we go round and round and round, and then when we start, we're going the wrong way. And if you've ever been the wrong way on the interstate, it's not good. It's really bad. Really bad. Some of y'all old folks got something to look forward to if you try that, man. Think about it now, maybe you'll quit driving. So finally, these truckers, they start helping. And Keith, he's a good driver down here. We didn't wreck. I mean, he was in hot pursuit. So finally, this guy whips off, you know, on the right-hand side. and he whips off, Keith's right in there behind him. And the door opened up real quick, and the guy jumps out, and it's a tall bank. Skimming up that bank. And at that time, y'all may not believe this, but I was in good shape. I was a jogger. I was running about 5 miles a day. I was in super shape. I go right up the bank behind him. I get just about to the top of the bank. If y'all ever heard something like a big hitting a fence and how the wire stretches? Well, there's a fence on the backside of the right-of-way on the interstate. And that guy hit that fence and went, shee, like that. And about that time, I'm at the top of the fence. I said, I got him now. He's going to be laid out. I hear 2 gunshots. And Keith hollers, Jim, come back. He might have a gun. You know those old great big dogs, big dogs that they cower down, you know, they're scared of you? How they get down and just sort of belly walk to you, you know, they're scared, they ain't going to bite you nothing. That was me coming down that bank. Scared me to death. I don't think he got in any trouble, and I hope he didn't for shooting that gun, but I'm glad he did say come back, Jim, because I don't know what I got into. I've had a little fun with Keith tonight, and we've had a lot of fun over the years, but I want to say this from the heart. I brought our annual tonight, and looking through it this afternoon, we had a lot of people in our class that went off and made money and did good, did real good. I won't try to name them all, but they did a fine job leaving Forsyth. But I'll always have a special place in my heart for the ones of us that stayed in Forsyth and tried to make a difference. Keith has done that with his life. He could have left. When he got through with FBI Academy, he could have went anywhere in the United States and got a job. But he chose to stick with the hometown and try to make it better for his children and his grandchildren, hopefully. And I think he's doing that. That's why he's my friend, and that's why I count him as one of the 5. But they say you can count your 5 best friends on one hand. Thank you for what you do, Keith. Thank you for what you're going to do in the future. Don't lock me up on the way home.